After hundreds of hours of watching trail braking tutorials, you still cannot apply it in your driving. You trail brake too early, too late, too long, or too hard. Or the car, the setup, or even the sim doesn't allow your part of the technique. Trail braking isn't the goal. Understanding is. This video isn't about trail braking. It's about speed and load. Understand those and you stop questioning your inputs. I've been sim racing for years, have done dozens of coaching sessions, and also created hundreds and hundreds of car setups in different simulators. And it doesn't matter what skill level you are or what simulation you drive, if you get through this video, you'll understand car behavior at the core. Let's go. And you want to get at the core because every type of corner, car combination or simulation will give you a different answer on how you should trail brake, how you should steer, and how you use a throttle, and how to be fastest in general. For instance, this is a grip circle, and no, this is nothing new, but we're gonna add load transfer to this model, and that will explain a lot of things that you visually cannot see. The basic understanding of a grip circle is we have a tire, which is like if it's rolling on a same speed, it's gonna be in the middle. It's very much under the limit. When we start cornering, we can get up to the point where it starts to scream and whatever, but then if we add braking to it, then we lose control. Same goes for braking itself. If we start applying turning the wheel as we braking, we escape the grip circle and we get some understeer or oversteer. To understand the grip circle better, we can introduce load transfer to the grip circle. So the blue line will represent a unloaded tire, the yellow one a average loaded tire, and the red line will explain heavy loaded tire. To drive at the absolute limit, you need to understand when you accelerate, you unload front tires, you load up rear tires. As you hit the brakes, you load up the fronts, but then you unload the rears. And same goes for cornering. You got load transfer happening all the time. And if you understand this in combination with the grip circle, you can find new limits in your driving, and that will give you better lap times. And lap times isn't the only goal, it's also basically understanding on different speed states and why you can, for this example for instance, hit the brakes fully in a straight line using a high speed, explaining the load transfer with the grip circle. So you see here that we braking hard and load transfers to the front. The red tires represent the outer loaded grip circle. The blue tires represent unloaded grip circle limits. So this means the rear tires are on the limit, but the front tires are as well on their limit. Understand that unloaded tires can lose control. Loaded tires can also lose control, but they are on a different condition because we have load transfer in the mix. And you can imagine if you're driving 100 and you hit the brakes, then this is going to look a lot different than when you're driving 260. When you accelerate, the same thing happens. You hit the throttle fully with a dead center steering wheel, and the tires are going to be on this part of the grip circle, meaning the rear tires are close to spinning, the front tires are actually doing nothing, but I put them here in the circle to understand them as they are still a part of acceleration. You can imagine when we start turning the wheel to the right, for instance, they very quickly escape their blue grip circle. So for the blue grip circle, we lose control here because there's no load on it and we have less grip because of load transfer being here at the back. That's why when your wheel is in a straight line, you can hit that throttle fully and enjoy great amounts of acceleration, which is important on corner exit because that will give you the lap time. If we use a small amount of throttle to keep the car under a steady cornering speed, let's say 180, we can turn the wheel and we have cornering grip. So the tires will be all the way up here on the cornering part of the grip circle. Again, the right tires will have the load on the loaded grip circle and the inner tires will have the unloaded grip circle. So they're both on a limit, and for all the pros in this video, I'm fully aware that I'm massively generalizing things, but let's keep going. So to understand workload and trail braking, which is this video is kind of about, but not really, is about managing these tires and keeping them on their limits. The better we can put these tires on the limits of these loaded grip circles, the faster we go through a corner. So if we steer a certain amount, we bleed off the brakes, we can manage the grip circles every time, combined with this load transfer. Same goes for the throttle. When you're hitting the gas, you gonna steer maybe a little bit, but you cannot do it fully, because if you do it fully, you push yourself into oversteer or understeer. Again, over here it's important that you manage these tires in their grip circles and respect the amount of grip they can produce as we using steering and acceleration at the same time. Now, important to note here is that at some extent you can understand this, but when speed increases, this gets very sensitive on certain inputs. Let me explain further. So let's imagine you driving 265 and you hitting the brakes. And now all of a sudden you start turning the wheel. You push the front tires out of the grip circle. Oh, this is a great example where we now understeer and lock up on a high speed corner. But why does this happen so fast? I mean, we're only doing a small amount. That means because we are braking so hard at the moment, we cannot use more steering input. So the next time when you're on a really fast corner and you do a very sudden change of direction, you upset something. Now in this stage you upset the fronts and you got some load transfer here and you're steering the wheel over here. You're losing the front tires here. You understeer out of a corner and you might return the wheel back straight, stop the car and move on. Now this situation is super important because it can happen on every speed state. And I've seen in some coaching sessions now already that people tend to brake late. Then they look at the apex and they think, oh man, I need to kind of stop and start steering. But they rob themselves of braking performance while doing so. And I'm not gonna pretend I am the absolute best driver. I'm doing this as well to some extent. And the people that get the car to stop as fast as possible control this better than anyone else. But that was actually a good situation where we lock up the fronts. But we also have the same problem if we unload the rear tires and they start to give up early. And that means when we turn the wheel and we're braking hard, that the rear unloaded grip circle tires leave the circle. Now you snap into oversteer and lose control. Now when I create my own car setups, I kind of make them like this never happens on the lower levels so we can maintain control. But this is also where brake bias starts to play a part. When we have very low brake bias, meaning we shift a lot of braking performance to the rear, this tends to happen quickly. Obviously, there's a bunch of nuances to this with different cars, downforce, what have you. This could also happen like mid-speed corner, like you lose the rears halfway in the corner. So how to maintain control then when you're in the Indianapolis corner of Le Mans? You want to use the steering and be very gentle on the brakes. Why is this? Load shifts quickly to the front, to the left over here, and you need to be very gentle with the brakes to keep these tires in the window. So you will see that very gentle steering, very gentle brake inputs are required to keep these white balloons in their limits so you don't lose control. And at high speed, again, at high speed, these balloons will quickly disappear out of the circle because the load transfer has this accelerating effect on how the tires push out the circle. And how fast these tires escape the circle under load transfer conditions also explains when cars are hard to drive, or when people complain about, I lose the car quickly, it snaps on me every time, it's slidey. It's because one of these things happen. And some cars do this, like, are more forgiving that way than others. Hey, and if you're liking this content this far, could you please hit that like button and check out the description for car setup levels. They also have a huge impact on how these tires are leaving the grip circle for stability or lap time. So tires don't just give up. They have a nuance and a slip to it, and there is different layers of control that the tire has once it exceeds the grip circle. So imagine this green line is a very safe limit. Then we have a yellow line, an orange line, and a red line. And this represents the loaded grip circle. All right? So try to be as clear here as possible. When we steer and brake at the same time, we can get in a certain slip angle, meaning the tire deflects, it goes a different direction than the tarmac is traveling, and the amount of steering input is going to determine if we are very safely on the limit, getting closer to the limit, getting dangerously close to the limit, or exceeding the limit. And when you see people fishing for grip on the steering wheel, they see it changes the steering wheel all the time. They're basically playing on this area and like finding the optimal grip. And there's nuance to this. Is this faster? Is this faster? Maybe this is faster. Who knows? But this is like what's happening when you zoom in more on the tire slip. For instance, this orange line could represent that the car is traveling in a straight line, the tire is under an angle, but it's still really turning the car and it's at an optimal slip angle, for instance. When we use too much steering, as we do this, and the car keeps going in a straight line, sorta, and we steer the steering wheel too much, then we exceed that slip angle and the tire is just going outside the circle and it's not producing any cornering grip anymore, the lateral grip. And sometimes it's unclear to me how much I can turn the steering wheel on certain situations, maybe not necessarily under the braking, because when we're braking we can get a very dominant tire. But let's also talk about the rear tires, how that translates into slip angle and load transfer and all that good stuff. You see this difference with the tire? Like the car is rotating now. We're hitting the brakes, we're using a small steering angle, and the rear tires are at an optimal slip angle, and that feels like rotation. That's what they say about rotating the car under the brakes. When you exceed that, however, they leave the grip circle and you might get oversteer and lose control. So when you steer more as you brake, or you maybe brake more and steer more, this effect will happen and the rear tires leave the grip circle. Again, I want to point out, some cars are really forgiving like this, others immediately kill you. I want to go more into that fishing for grip, and this is going to be an example of driving slowly on a chicane, for instance, or on a slow corner where we're using a bunch of steer lock. We're almost at the end of trail braking, so I used this green bar just to show that it was the throttle. We're not actually touching the throttle. Anyways, little bit of braking, but lots of cornering and trying to get that front wheels on the limit as we're using a lot of steer lock. Now maybe you're driving really slow and you're mid-corner, but you saw, oh man, I can't make it, and you add more steer lock and you again hit the brakes to make the corner. Now all of a sudden you get new understeer again, this front light go outside of the grip circle, and you get this mid-slow corner understeer, if that's possible. But then again, like I explained before, it could also happen that your rears then unload. And obviously, car setup is really important in that regard. If in a slow corner you lose it on oversteer, differential, spring settings, anti-roll bars, all have influence on this behavior. Now, when we are finally ready to hit the throttle again and we have a bunch of steer lock, we kind of want to push that throttle, right? So we start pushing the throttle, and load transfer now shifts backwards as we corner. And what's happening is that we now get understeer. And I have some people say to me, the setups are understeery, whatever. Then I see how they exit corners. They have the steering wheel all the way up to the right. They floor the gas pedal, and the front tires just don't have any grip. And the car will just keep pushing in a straight line in the low speed situation. And what this means is that we cannot use the steer lock at this moment because we have so much load on the rear tires. we can basically not use so much steering input as we exit corners. That's why trail braking is so important, because we want to get a rotation done before we hit the throttle. And let's move on. And you'll see a lot of people keep pushing the throttle, and then at some point the fronts might go back in the grip circle and they hit the throttle too hard, and then the rears will leave the grip circle and you got the exit spins. And that's why people spin it on exit. I want to point out that in the low speed area, we can use a lot of aggressive steering if we keep off the throttle and off the brakes. The car is really, you can really switch like a chicane, slow chicane. You can really be aggressive on the steering, because low transfer does not have the accelerating effect on how quickly the tires leave the grip circle. However, if you add a bunch of power on the rear tires, then all of a sudden you can push them out very quickly. So that's why you see a lot of people spin on chicanes, because they are still on a chicane, they're still turning the wheel, they hit the throttle and then spin it. Obviously, we have traction control to helping us out here. I have a great traction control video that explains how this tire is going to be pushed back in the grip circle and remain control as you hit the throttle on your exits. And that video is in the description. Now, if you think like you want to add a comment to this, please do. These videos take ages to make and I'm learning from them as well, and there might be some like imperfections. Please point them out as I'm redefining all of this kind of theory. It's just a lot of fun for me to make them. So let's keep on going, because we have a lot of stuff to cover still. Now, what if you did exit correctly and you increase the speed? You got a mid speed, so think about like 160, 170. You can definitely floor the throttle, because car dynamics are a bit different now. As hard braking at high speed shifts low transfer forward quickly on the throttle at 180 or 200 kilometers, the acceleration is not a big burden on the rear tires anymore, because we just don't have enough power to accelerate the car any further. So we can use a little bit of more steering input. Now have a look that this could represent a halfway loaded tire, so that's this grip circle. Then this front right tire is actually pretty much unloaded as we cornering and like hitting the throttle, full throttle. So this tire is fully loaded, has more grip, might be on the limit. We might be really nicely exiting a corner at this stage. All right, but we do steer. Now, what if we encounter a curb? You see people taking curbs to gain rotation. And what's happening? On the same situation, now we're hitting a curb here. And all of a sudden we get a bunch of load on that tire, but only for a brief moment. And this could really upset the car into additional rotation. Now that could mean that you oversteer, or it could mean you're actually making the corner. And in Le Mans Ultimate, the curbs are really sensitive like this. Again, setup aggression is going to determine how much rotation you get from taking that curb. But especially in Le Mans Ultimate, it's really important to touch these curbs to gain that rotation, to gain that new tire load on that tire as you enter curbs like this, creating rotation in the car. And sometimes with aggressive setup, that means you should unwind the wheel a little bit as you encounter these curbs. So that's why you see people flying off curbs and where others just remain control. Now let's get into some practical examples on how to take corners and how grip circles kind of are on your driving line. So this will hopefully cement the different types of steering inputs in different corners. And I'm also going to explain how you can do it better. So this is just a simple racing line. In my opinion, racing line is absolutely sacred, but let's just use this example to understand it. In this area, we are using hard braking. Again, front and left tires are in the grip circle, close to the loaded limit, and the rear tires are close to the unloaded limit. When we go further, we trail brake. We open up the steering wheel and we bleed off the brakes. We push the front tires in this loaded area, the rear tires in this loaded area. We could have some nice rotation. And as we go further, we unwind we turn the steering wheel more, and we releasing the brake more, because else we would lock up the front tires or we might spin on a slow spin. So we definitely closely using the limits of what the tires can do. And now we're steering even more on this turning point where we are done with the braking sequence, and now we are here on mid corner, and we rotate the car some more with steering, and now we can actually go on the throttle. But now we have a problem, because we wanted to go on the throttle, but we have maybe some understeer, so we need to carefully be with the throttle, wait with the throttle, and now we actually can open up the steering wheel again. There is a less, the front tires might still unload more as we hit the throttle, so we can get some understeer over here, like explained before in the video. And now we're here. At this stage, we can fully enjoy the throttle as we unwind the steering wheel and we exit the corner. Now at this stage, the front tires are doing nothing anymore. The rear tires might also below the limit, as we have so much speed now that we don't have enough acceleration to spin the rear tires. And now, like, this is how you drive at a freeway, right? High speed, very safe, the tires in the grip circle. But the problem with this example, it's actually a really horrible example, because we want to do this instead. And I'm also not going to pretend this is perfect, but it's going to show you a different dynamic on how we use the tires. So we approximately have the same braking zone over here. We go a little bit further, we trail brake more, but we let the car shoot out to get sort of like a first, like this is 3 apexes basically. You have an apex here and you have an apex here. And here we actually are driving a little bit slower. We're turning the wheel even more as we're hitting maybe a little bit of braking. Then we have the car rotated nicely. An important note on how we could rotate so nicely is that if we are here on this part, is that we hitting the throttle with quite an aggressive steer lock, and we might explicitly, on purposely, push the rear tires a little bit out of the grip circle to unsettle the rear, to make the car rotate faster. That way we can point the nose of the car to the exit and then enjoy this whole full green line of acceleration. Now you can see in this example, this is probably a lot quicker. And it's not only that this is a lot quicker for the reason that we are being on the throttle and carrying all that exit speed up to the next corner, but another problem with the other racing line is that we are on the limit here all the time. We are pushing and pushing and pushing. So to some extent, you want to try to do this on a lot of corners in your driving. Try to find a point where you can turn the car a little bit more, slow down that mid-speed corner, hit the gas to rotate the car more fastly, and then go on the exit. Now, if you like this video and you want to go even deeper in car setup building and how mechanical grip and aerodynamic grip actually works, I highly recommend this video because that will explain it in great detail. Thanks for watching.